Log on, tune in, find out. Another good idea from Cambridge.
When the Labour Party, when the general election was in 1945, I can't remember voting a postal vote for that. I suppose I must have done. I never was all that interested in politics. And in 1945, where was I when I'd already penned where I was. That's the year we got married. I don't know where I was, either up London or in Cardiff, I reckon. Because I finished up in Cardiff. I had to get off a boat in Cardiff. I was bound for Vancouver, and I got taken off in Cardiff and spent about 3 months in Cardiff before they decided to close the outside bases down in alphabetical order, and you had to go back to your own depot. And we had only been in Cardiff a couple of weeks, and the leading seaman come in the room we had lunch one day. He said, "Anybody want a game of football this afternoon?" There was about 6 of us in the room. We said, "Why?" He said, "Well, we've entered a team in the Cardiff Wednesday League." He said, "And we got a team of what we call possibles." He said, "We want another team of odds and sods to make up to give them a game so they have practice." So I said, "Yeah, I don't mind a game." I said, "We've got no kit or nothing." He said, "No, go down in the basement." He said, "Petty officer so-and-so will dish you out with shoes, short and socks and shirt." So 2 or 3 of us went down and we got fixed up. And the bus come along and picked the whole lot of us up, took us to a recreation ground we rented apparently. And we played the team of what they call possibles. When they finished, the petty officer come up to me and he said, "What's your name?" I said, "Ruggles." He said, "How long you been in Cardiff? How long you been in the base?" I said, "Last week." So he said, You'll have to be promoted to the proper team." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "You'll have to come in the proper team." So I said, we played every Wednesday against army teams or Air Force teams or works teams who could get a Wednesday off sort of thing. And we played 12 games, we'd won 9 out of 12, and we were top of the league. And they disbanded, they finished for Christmas, and we all came home for Christmas, left the skeleton crew like in our barracks, in our house we sort of commandeered. And when we got back in the new year, the fixtures weren't going to start till got decent weather, because the Cardiff City Council didn't want the football grounds or the parks cut up too much. So you got to wait till the end of February before you could really get on them again. And then the news come round that they were going to demob. You're all going to be sent back to your various depots. Mine was Chatham. Some went back to Portsmouth. Some had to go back to Devonport. So eventually the day came. We got on the train bound for Chatham. I don't know how many it was, 10 or a dozen of us. They were closing outside bases down first. Cardiff, alphabetical order, was one of the first. They were going through the joining routine at Chatham. I filled in my card to go into front of the regulation petty officer, and the bloke said over my shoulder, "You want to get rid of that card?" he said. I said, "Why?" He said, "Don't want to put Thomasville, Great Yeldham, Essex. You want to put Thomasville, Braintree, Essex." I said, "Why?" He said, "There's a naval camp at Braintree, isn't there?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm going tomorrow. I've got to catch a bus out here at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon." I said, "Where do you live?" He said, "Bocking." I said, "I didn't know there was a camp at Braintree." "Oh yeah," he said, "there is." So he went and got me a fresh card, and I filled in Ruggles, the address, Thomasville, at Braintree, Essex. Went in front of the petty officer and handed him my card, and he looked down at it. He said, "You live near Braintree, Jack?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Braintree camp would do you then?" I said, "Yes." He said, right, have your kit packed tomorrow at 2 o'clock. He said, and catch the bus outside on the steps, will you? I said, thank you very much. I went back to Danes. I said, yeah, I've got to come on the bus now. So we found ourselves the next day on this bus bound for Braintree. And there was lots of Londoners on there. They thought Braintree was halfway between Southend and London. They had a fit when they knew it was out in the wilds of North Essex. As soon as we got there, old Danes, he knew the ropes. He said, as soon as we get there, he said, we'll put in for a staff job. I said, shall we? He said, yeah, you leave it to me. So he went and found this petty officer and he said, we want to go on the staff. So he said, are you sure? And Dane said, yeah. So he's still got a list as long as that. He said, look, you'll have to go on the bottom. Dane said, no matter, put it on the bottom. So he took our names and put it on the bottom. 2 days later, we got sent for. He said, I've got a staff job for you too. I said, have you? He said, yeah, what? Petty officer's mess. He said, report there at 7:30 in the morning and you wait on table with the petty officers. He said, and they'll all be finished by 8:30. He said, then you can have your breakfast and got the rest of the morning off. Till he said evening meal, then you wait on table evening meal. So Danes and me looked one over, thought, that's all right. We'd done 2 or 3 breakfasts and Danes, he got the right idea. He said, if you get a good plate of bacon and egg, he said, push it in the hot plate. He said, we'll have that for ourselves. We used to steal a bit of bacon off one plate and put it on another, and we always had a good breakfast, us two. Then I got sent for one morning to the sports, we had to go in front of the sports officer. I thought, I wonder what he want. So anyhow, I tapped the door and he said, come in, and there was this lieutenant sat down. He said, Able Seaman Ruggles? I said, yes. He said, I hear you live locally. So I said, yes, sir. So he said, I don't know where you know, but we've got a football team in the camp here. He said, it plays in the North Essex League. So I said, well, yes, sir, but he did mention it, sir. He said, well, I went to a North Essex League meeting last night in Braintree. He said, and I met a Mr. Beadle. I said, oh, yeah, because Wally Beadle was our secretary up Toppersville, and Wally had played for Yeldon before the war, and when the war more or less finished, well, went in 1945-46, Braintree, North Essex League tried to start up again, and local teams were invited to join, and Wally Beadle was full of, go ahead, young man. He entered the team Toppersville in it. He worked at Rivers. He got several people that played for Heddingham and several that played for Yeldon. They'd come and play. Toppersville, the only team round here that started up. He said, I was talking to Mr. Beadle last night, and he said, he informed me you're one of his young players. So I said, yes, sir. He said, unless he's having difficulty in getting a team, he said, I don't see why we should stand in a little village club way, he said. I'll give you permission, he said, whether you're on duty or not, he said, to have 3 hours. Will that be enough on a Saturday afternoon, 3 hours off? So I said, well, I suppose it all depends on where we're playing. I said, it'll take me half an hour to get home and half an hour back, that's an hour. I said, and the football match lasts an hour and a half, and plus quarter of an hour for half time. I said, I should be cutting it a bit fine in 3 hours. Oh, well, he said, we won't argue about it now. I'll give you 4 hours off. He said, when you're on duty, and he wrote a shit out, he said, you produce this at the gate. He said, that exempt you from any duties for 4 hours. I said, thank you, sir. He said, now best of luck for Toppersfield. I said, thank you very much, sir. And of course, I used to come home every night and ride down to Yeldon on my bike the next morning early, leave it in the chapel, then Yeldon, catch the bus to Braintree, stand outside the Horn Hotel, and there'd always be somebody come along who'd give you a ride up to the naval camp, which is about a mile along the London Road. I think I played 3 games. I had three Saturdays off when I was there, and then the word come round they were going to demob 40 to 50 group in alphabetical order, and Braintree was first. So I had to go to Chatham and got the mob really quicker than what normally we would have done. So that was quite all right. So come back then in the March, I got demobbed in the March. Topperfield were going great guns. An old mate went to school with, two old mates went to school with, were more or less demobbed at the same time. There was three of us, three young, strong young fellows. I was 22, we were all 22. Went straight in the Topperfield team, and we had a hell of a team. We got in the final of the North Essex League Cup and the final of the Headingham Charity Cup. And our opponents in both finals was Halstead Town. And I don't think Halstead Town thought much playing a little village team like Toppersfield. And both finals had to be that they was fixed for the last Saturday of the season. The first Saturday in May was the last Saturday of the season. Now the Headingham Charity Cup Committee applied to the Football Association or the Essex County Association to put it back a week and play out the game the next week after the season finished. Essex County got in touch with the Football Association. They said no, it's got to be played before the season finished on that day. So we said, well, there's only one way for it. We'll play Halstead in the North Essex League Cup final on the Saturday afternoon. We're going to have tea in Castle Headingham tea rooms. We'll come back and play the Headingham Cup in the evening on the same grounds. The Headingham ground was of his choice. That's what we done. Played Halstead Town at Headingham in the afternoon. There was over 1,000 spectators rolled up. I forget what the many gate receipts. I think they just took a box round and people put in what they liked. We drew 2-2 after extra time. We went down to Castle and Headingham and had cups of tea and scones. We came back and we changed one fella at the team and brought in another one for the evening match, and we drew 1-1 the evening match. So we drew with Halstead Town 2 games, both on the same day. We got our football dinner at night, and when Halstead knew we got our football dinner, they said, right, you hold the cups for the first 6 months, take cups home with you. So we said, right, thank you very much. Have a couple of your fellas to come and join us. So they sent their secretary and captain to come up here and had their dinner with us at the school. That was good. That was in the Sunday Express on the Sunday, because Plummer, he was deputy editor of the Express. He'd got a report in about the match on the very next day. So that was all quick. That was very good. So I was demobbed early 46. Well, as I said, the football team had gone well. Wally Beadle had then left. Now, he had another year of secretary. Then he left and bought a house in Halstead. And I was elected secretary of the football club. I think I'd done about 14 years non-stop until we all got in our 30s and decided we were getting too old to play. So we all packed up together and the club had to disband then. And then we've reformed again, and when we reformed I was elected chairman. I was chairman then for another 12 years or more. Got on the Football League Management Committee, the Halstead League. Got the Long Service Award for Essex County Football Association. Anyhow, we connected with football 50 years up Toppersfield, and all I called it a day sort of thing. And of course, the parish council elections were coming round in 1947, and I could listen to reports going up the pub in the background that there was going to be a little stir up. Apparently, these parish councils had been voting one another on every couple of 3 years. One proposed the other, one proposed the other. All Conservatives, all the village had got the idea, and none of them were doing anything at all. George Unwin, who got married and lived at Toppersfield Hall, F. St. G. Unwin, Frederick St. George, was elected chairman and so on. And various farmers were on, Harold Goodchild was on, and so else was on, all staunch Conservatives. And I could hear grumbles in the pub that the Labour were going to get together, Labour people were going to get together, and Mrs. Plummer was going to put up, and a bloke named Dvorkovich up the lane was going to put up. He was a Russian Jew. about Freddie Fitzstiff down the causeway, he was going to put up, the staunch socialist. Cliff Hardy up the Grass Green was going to put up, he was another socialist. Old Jim Ruggles, he was a staunch old Red, as he called himself. I'm a Red. He was putting up, that was 5 of them out of 7. So the rumour got round that they filled their forms in, there was 13 of them. They got to be elected for these seven places. And that's what one interested. We're having great fun in that, you see, having great laughs in the pub about it. Hey, do you know who you're going to vote for? Well, how are you going to vote, they'd say? You've got to put your name down on a bit of paper. And yeah, Mr. Unwin must have got the hair of this, but he got his gardener, elf butcher, to fill a bank bag full of little tick beans. Elf rolled up at the meeting down the school, this election meeting, the annual meeting, with his bag of beans. And the clerk, Bert Deverson, read the names of the 13 out that were going to seek election for the 7 places. He read them out in alphabetical order. So everybody in the hall, in the school rather, was issued with 7 beans. Elf came round and counted the 7 beans in your hand. You weren't first forced to use all 7, but you could if you wished. So Bert read out the first name and said, Elf would go round with a cap. If you wanted to vote for him, you put the bean in a hat. And then Elf would get back at the table and these beans would be collected, put in a little bag with a name on the paper bag, who they belonged to, whose name it was, so-and-so and so-and-so. And then that's how they went on till they got the last one, which was Mr. Unwin. Afton G. Unwin, they went round with a hat, collected his beans. Then the clerk opened all the bags and counted them out. So-and-so, so many beans. So-and-so, so many beans. And come to finish, Mr. Unwin, 4 beans. So he duly and had announced that the so-and-so names, he's got the most number of beans, were duly elected. My mother went to the post office the next morning and the postmistress was a staunch Conservative. And she knew my mother was. She said, what do you think went on down at school last night? My mother said, I don't know. Well, haven't you heard? She said, no. She said they all had to vote with beans. You ever heard such a thing? My mother said, beans? She said, yes, Bell Butcher gave them all 7 beans each. She said, and the silly fools, she said, they got no more sense. They all voted with these beans and got rid of them when they come to Mr. Unwin. She said, poor old boy, he'd only got 4 beans left. She said, what do you think of that? My mother said, fancy that, poor old Mr. Unwin. And that's how they kicked George Unwin off the parish council for 3 or 4 years. Lady Plummer, she got made lady later on, but she formed a village hall committee. Because we realised the village wanted a village hall. I mean, the school, I say we had to make do down the school, but there was 1 or 2 restrictions down the school. We had a football dinner, as I said, down there once, and the parson was a staunch teetotaler. I went up, he was a vice president of the club because he was an Arsenal supporter. And he was in college overlooking Highbury Ground. He could sit in his college window and watch Arsenal play before the war. And when Ipswich beat Arsenal in the final, his daughter came up and she said, oh, Dick, she said, there'll be trouble in heaven tonight with Arsenal losing every town. She said, Father will play thunder up there tonight. Anyhow, he said, you can have your dinner, Dick, down to school, but I'm sorry we can't allow any alcohol. I said, oh dear, Rector, I said, that's a shame. I said, we got 1 or 2 prominent guests coming. I said, you didn't have dinner wine in those days, that was beer on the table. I said, surely we can have a bottle of beer on the table. He said, I'll see what Mrs. Claxton, one of the school managers, says. Come and see me tomorrow. So I went down the next evening and he said, I've talked it over with Mrs. Claxton. He said, we've compromised a bit. He said, you can have 1 bottle of beer only per head in the school for your dinner. All right, I said, thank you very much, sir. We put our heads on it. We put our heads together, a committee, football committee, we said, what you've got to do is get rid of the old parson when the dinner is over, and we have a little bit of a dance and a little sing-song. We can have some beer put in the boys' porch, keep the door locked, and we have plenty of beer for the evening. He'll be out the way, nobody will be the wiser. So that's what we done. We stocked up with crates of beer in the boys' porch, and when the dinner was over and the speeches was over, I went and got old parson's overcoat, and I said, I'll get your coats out. I wasn't going to go just yet, he said, so I said, well, as a matter of fact, I said, it's starting to rain. I said, and I've got a taxi, got a car, I'm going to take you home. So, oh, well, he said, I suppose I ought to go. And I held his coat out for him, and he got in it and drove him home, and then the jollification started. We would have been all right, nobody would have known a difference. But one young lad had a few drinks too many, and he had to fall up against poor old Mrs. Claxton's door on his way home. 12 o'clock at night, there old boy Hoy fell up against her door. She got out of bed and opened the bedroom window. She said, what's going on down there? He said, get to bed, he said, you ain't no interfering with you. She said, is that you, Leslie? He said, yeah. Where have you been? He said, I've been to the football dinner. She said, are you drunk? He said, well, I've had a few. Oh. I came home the next day, Dolly said, you've got to go and treat the carpet with the parson tonight. So I went down. He said, Dick, I'm very, very disappointed in you. Apparently from Mrs. Claxton, he said, there was a lot of drink flowing about in the hall after I'd gone. So I thought, no good in Ireland. So I said, well, Rector, it's like this. I said, we didn't steal it. We bought it. We paid for it. We'd got guests. We gave it to them. I said, it wasn't so much as all that. I said, I think the young boy I'd been up the pub and got one or two on the quiet. I said, we only had a bottle each afterwards. Well, he said, I didn't think you'd let me down like that, he said. So he said, well, we'll say no more about it, shall we? I said, I think that's the best thing to do. I said, we're trying to get a village hall committee going and see if we can get a village hall. And we had a meeting in the chapel schoolroom, and the village hall committee was formed. I was appointed treasurer, and I was treasurer for 41 years, continuous 41 years. Thought I've had enough, going to finish. We were doing a fete up Barrack Hall. I mean, the lady, she wasn't Lady Plummer then, Mrs. Plummer. Her husband was, he suddenly became MP for Deptford, Labour MP for Deptford. The groundnut scheme came along. I don't know if you remember the groundnut scheme. He was chairman of the groundnut scheme. And it was a complete flop, really, this groundnut scheme. But Plummer got knighted over it. He done Whitlock's a lot of good. He done Whitlock's got a lot of work from this groundnut, like big harrows, made harrows to harrow the ground, wide old things. We used to have to pack up in packing cases to go off to Dar es Salaam, down the Suez, you know, down the east coast of Africa to the port, Mombasa, that sort of way. And so once old Plummer got an MP, she got, and actually he got knighted, so he's Leslie Plummer, she got Lady Plummer. She eventually got Baroness after he died. And she used to have a fete, a village fete up Barrack Hall where they lived, every year for the village hall fund. We were told if we get 100, we were told that to build a village hall was going to cost £2,000. If we raised 1,000, we'd get £1,000 grant. And Plummer said, don't be too ambitious. Set yourselves a target of £100 a year for 10 years. Take your time and don't rush it. Just get ourselves £100 a year for 10 years. So we thought, all right, so we ran a monthly whist drive for about £5 a time profit. And we'd run a fete at Barrack Hall for about £60 or £70 profit. And we were well ahead of our target after about 5 years. And we realised that under inflation, where we want 1,000, we now want 1,500. Well, one of these fetes up Barrack Hall, I used to do the tombola, go round and sell the raffle tickets, you know, round, and I wanted to go and have a cup of tea and a sandwich. So I said to a young girl that lived opposite us, or next door to us rather, I said, Maureen, take your tickets and go and sell a few for me while I have a cup of tea and a sandwich. So she said, all right. So about an hour later, she came and brought me the book, and I put my hand on her shoulder and said, thank you very much, girl. She was a girl about 16 or something like that then. Lady Plummer come along when I was giving Maureen the book to sell them, and came along when I took the book away from her. So she turned to me, and Dolly's making signs to me, she turned to me and she said, I want to see you in the morning room. So I said, when? She said, at once. So I said, all right, my lady, go on through. So I walked through the kitchen, I got in the morning room, and eventually the door opened, and in she come. She said, what are you playing at? So I said, I don't know what you're talking about. She said, twice in the last hour I've been by you, you've had your hand on Maureen Hardy's shoulder. What are you playing at? She said, if you're playing fast and loose, she said, I'll block your bloody head off. She said, let me tell you this, Dick Ruggles. She said, of all the people I know, she said, many of them are titled people, well-to-do people. She said, if I was asked to send an ambassador to a foreign country, I wouldn't hesitate and say, send Dolly. Don't you ever forget that? I said, I'm not like to do, lady. I thought, what a great compliment, wasn't it? When the football club reformed about 1967, and we had a good team up here, good enough to win the league, and we had our annual dinner. And of course, we really went to town on it. We had a whole lot of vice presidents on one table, and then a top table on the stage, and I was chairman then. And George Owen, I think, was president at the time. Lady Plummer was a vice president. They had 5 or 6 up the top table on the stage, vice presidents. And we gave them, all the vice presidents, we gave a complimentary ticket to. And during the evening, during the performers introducing, you know, guest speakers from the Essex County Football Association, and from the Halstead League, and from so-and-so, various clubs and referees association, we went to town. We invited all to send a representative. And during the evening, she passed me this invitation. That's a complimentary football club invitation to Lady Plummer. She passed me this and said, put it in your pocket. I put it in the pocket, I put it in my pocket, and I read it when I got home. And it says, you are doing your job magnificently, as though you were born to it. In time you will be a perfect organiser and speaker at special dinners. Many congratulations. And that was Lady Plummer back in 1970. When Lady Plummer died, 1972, she got cancer of the throat. She used to smoke quite a lot. And we'd had a football dinner in 1970, and we realised that the hall would be a lot better if we could have an extension, a bar built on the side, because we had to run a bar from the kitchen. So when we had the football club had the annual meeting, I said, we're bringing up the village hall committee, see if they can't get a bit built on the side. So she was in bed ill, and she rang up and she said, can you come and see me? So I said, yes. So I went up and she laid up, she was up in the bedroom. So she said, you'll have to have an annual meeting of the village hall committee, you know, and she was chairman. So I said, oh no, I've been awaiting my lady called treasurer. So I got all the books done. I said, I'm just waiting for you to get fit enough to come. Never mind about me, she said, you call a meeting, you're vice chairman. She said, you call a meeting and have your annual meeting done with it. And I said, what the football club had suggested at their annual meeting. So she said, what do you mean? So I drew in on the back of a box of matches what I thought to show her. She said, that's a good idea. Get it done, she said, because the longer you leave it, the worse it's going to be. The more it's going to cost. So I should get on with it. So I said, right, I'll tell them when we have the annual meeting of the Village Hall Committee, I'll tell them what you said. She said, well, you'll have to take a chair. Tell them I'll be there next year. I said, all right, well, she died not long afterwards. And Sainsbury come to see me. we were living over here then. Sainsbury come and he said, you know, Lady Plummer was an agnostic. I said, yes. He said, I think we ought to get something up in the village hall. He said, it's a little farewell to her, don't you? I said, yes, we were talking about the other night. He said, we ought to have a little gathering, what we call Friends of Lady Plummer. He said, we don't want to advertise it. He said, we don't want the press and we don't want anybody from other villages coming. I said, purely and simply a Topplesfield event. He said, see what the Village Hall Committee says, will you? I said, yes. Yes, I will. He said, I'll come to see you next Saturday. So I had a word with some of the members of the Village Hall Committee, and Dolly and the ladies said, yes, if you have it, we'll lay on tea and coffee and perhaps a little finger bite, you know, afterwards, like as refreshments. Sainsbury came the next Saturday. He said, well, I said, yeah, the ladies at the Village Hall Committee said, that's a good idea, sir. They'll be prepared to lay tea and coffee on and a few little bites, you know, just to finish the evening off. He said, good. He said, you haven't mentioned anybody outside the village? I said, no. He said, well, keep it to yourself. He said, just spread word round the village. Well, he got his diary out. He said, on so-and-so date, one Friday evening. So I said, all right, so about fortnight, 3 weeks away. He said, I think Harold Wilson might come. He said, but don't tell anybody. He said, we don't want the press up here, we don't want photographers, he said. We don't want nothing like that, no publicity whatsoever. I said, don't worry, my lord, I shan't say a word. He said, so he said he may not come, but he's talking about he'd like to come. So on the race, he come up again the next week. He said, what I thought, Dick, he said, Harold Wilson's going to come. He said, put a table on the stage. He said, 3 chairs. He said, I'll take the chair. He said, and I shall introduce, I'll get up and introduce myself. He said, not that I want any introducing. And I'll talk about her work in the district. Like she was a manager of Civil Education Primary School and on a chairman of the magistrates and on so-and-so committee, and police committee and that sort of thing. He said, I'll talk about her work in the district. He said, I'll introduce Harold Wilson, talk about her work in Westminster. He said, then I'll introduce you. He said, to talk about her work in the village, all right? I said, yes, sir. You don't mind? I said, no, not a bit. He said, well, you do your football dinners all right. He said, you'll be able to do that treat. So I said, thank you, sir. So that's what we done. And on the Friday evening, we got the hall all set out, and the ladies had got the cups and saucers all ready in the kitchen. Lord Rothschild come from the helicopter and landed down George Elmer's on the meadow. All 1 or 2 high and mighty from Parliament came down. 1 or 2, I think, from his old Plummer's constituency at Deptford. Anyway, when we got, and I had to go up on the stage with Harold Wilson and Sainsbury. Sainsbury never even attempted to introduce me to Harold Wilson before we started. And I thought, please yourself, I don't care. And eventually, they shut the doors, and Sainsbury got up and spoke about her work in the district, about so-and-so and that sort of thing. And then he introduced Mr. Wilson. And I got right around that. And then Harold Wilson got up and spoke about a name in what she'd done in whiskey, got a bit of paper out, and he kept steadying his glass, and over the top of his glass a bit of paper. And he sat down, and I applauded him politely. And then Sainsbury introduced me, and I got up and I spoke for, I think, about 20 odd minutes or more about her work in the village. And I never had one, I'm not boasting, I never had one word written down. I'd memorised this speech as I went round Shore Hall, looking at my snares and traps and one thing and another, and added bits on what I thought would suit. And I went to treat. Harold Wilson looked up at me once or twice, and when I finished, I clapped and sat down, and the lady started bringing tea round. Harold Wilson turned to me, gave me his backer tin. He said, I noticed you've got a pipe in your pocket. Fill your pipe with my tobacco. I said, thank you, sir. I said, what sort of tobacco do you smoke? He said, I have it blended, especially from Scotland. And we had a bloke from the Foreign Office who lived up the lane. He was in the congregation, and John Thompson told me afterwards he went back to London in the Foreign Office on the Monday. He said, and they was interested. They said, well, how did you get on down Toppersfield with Lady Plummer's memorial service, they called it. He said that was a pantomime. He said there was Lord Sainsbury got up, a peer of the realm, reading his little bit of paper, his notes, what she'd done for the Halstead Hospital and so, and the bench and magistrates and so on. He said, and up got Harold Wilson, out come another bit of paper, what work in Westminster and so on. He said, and up got it, oh boy, he said, a mate of mine, the gamekeeper, went to the village school, he said, and he didn't read one word, he wiped the floor with both of them. I thought, what a lovely compliment that was. We said he'd come Lord Sainsbury again, because nearly every weekend he'd call when he'd come down, see what was happening in the village. So he came in one day and he said, one morning, he said, how much interest do we get with our money invested in the current account, in the deposit account at Barclays Bank? He said, it doesn't seem much to me. So I said, well, apparently that's what they pay. So I said, I don't know, I don't know what to do. I said, but I'm friendly with the bank manager at Halstead. I said, have a word. I said, he's a Fincherfield man. I said, I played football against him. I said, we're great pals, really. I said, I'll ring him up, Barclays, and you have a word with him. I rang Marshall, his name was. Rang up, came a word, Mr. Marshall, certainly. Well, I have Mr. Ruggles told me. Come on, hello Dick, what can I do for you? So I said, I got Lord Sainsbury in my house, Mr. Marshall. I said, he's a bit concerned that we only get so much percentage for our deposit account with Barclays Bank. I said, apparently he's on a committee where they've got their money invested in Barclays deposit account. They're getting a lot more interest in what we are. He said, put Lord Sainsbury on the phone to me, will you? Can you? I said, yeah. So you want to have a word with him, my lord? Good morning. Yeah, good morning, Lord Sainsbury. And he must have said to him, how much money have you got invested your committee that you're on? Oh, I think it's about 3-point-something million, Sainsbury said. Well, he said, if your village hall committee had got 3 million, he said, I should be able to give you that extra interest. Sainsbury said, oh, I see, what do you mean? Oh, thank you very much, that's all I want to know. Down there, he said, if we'd got 3.5 million, he said he'd give us that interest. I took Dolly and her mate, we went one Wednesday to Bury, do a bit of shopping. And we wandered around the market and so on, and it was getting on for lunchtime. We were going to have our lunch in the Kupala, do they call it? Is that the way you pronounce it?
Yeah, Kupala.
Kupala.
It's not now.
So I come across Marks and Spencer's. They said, we're going to just have a look around Marks and Spencer's. So I said, well, I'm going to make my way to Kupala, and I'm going to have a pint and book our table. They said, all right, we'll see you there in about half an hour. So off I went to Kupala and I ordered myself a pint. I said, can I book a table for 3? And said, certainly, sir. I booked the table for 3 and I went and took my pint, sat down at the table and picked the paper up. And I'd been in there about 10 minutes, nobody else was in the public bar at all. Then come 3 ladies. They went up the bar and they got their drinks and went and sat down on my left with the talking away to one another. And I'd rather gather they'd come in for the day's shopping, what they were saying. And one of them got up and went to the window and looked round. I said, "Can you see her?" She said, "No, I can't see her." He said, "I told you we shouldn't have let her go on around. You know what she's like. If you let her go on around, you get carried away. She won't be back here for an hour more. We should be lucky if we get a bit of dinner by the time she get back." "I'll sit down," I said. "She'll be back soon." "Oh, I know she won't," she said. "I know what she's like." I went another 10 minutes and up she got again, went to the window. "Can you see her?" "No." I knew one of us all and went with her. And she moaned away. And eventually she got up, she said, "Oh, here she come." "Well, about time too," they said. And in come this woman, I kept my head down behind the paper. And I had a sign, "I haven't been long ever." "Oh no," they said. I thought, I know that voice. She went up the bar and got herself a drink. She said, "Can I get you a drink while I'm here?" "Yes, please," they said. So they all had a drink. I thought, I know that voice. And when she went to sit down, I peered down my paper and I thought, "Oh yeah, I know who it is. That's Pat Coe from London. I was on the management committee of the league with her husband, and we used to meet once a year, football dinner, what the football league would put on for our benefit." So she said, "I thought you'd be worried where I got to." "No, no," they said. So I put my paper down. I said, "They've been a-swearing like hell about you. They'd never ought to let you went on around. You ought to seen their faces. Their necks got red, their faces got red." "I know we never went on," I said, "Yes, you did. You've been a moan ever since you've been in here about you shouldn't have went on around." So Pat got up, she said, "Oh, hello." She said, "Don't take it nose him, he's pulling your leg." She came over and gave me a peck on the cheek. She whispered in my ear, "I believe you." She went back. She said, "You mustn't take any notice of him." And I said, "Oh, well, I'm glad you know him, Pat." They said, "Good. We ain't took a bit of note. We didn't realise that you had gone any time at all." When I saw Pat about a month later, she said, "I cried raw when I got home to Mick." She said, I said, "Oh, Dick frightened them." She said, "Their faces went red." I said, "Well, they did." She said, "I knew they did." She said, "As soon as you said it," she said, "I thought, I'd better spill these teeth telling the truth." She said, "But they never said a word. They never mentioned it afterwards." Robin Soames bought our old rectory. Now, Robin was, when he bought the rectory, chairman of Watney's Brewery. And him and his wife came out and they did two boys and 2 girls. The eldest girl, Tamsin, got married to a Welsh guardsman. Me and Dolly got an invitation, but 4 or 5 more in the village had an invitation to go to the Guards Chapel. So we decided we'd hire a taxi and go up. The reception afterwards going to be held in the Ritz. So we went to the Guards Chapel. One of the Ruggles boys was there, Sam. They were the only ones we knew there really. Lord Denham, he proposed the toast. Lord Denham used to live up Spencer's where Lady Butler lived. He used to shoot with us. So he came up and had a word during the performance in the Savoy. And we only had little finger buffies, like, you know, little bits of meat on skewers and one thing they'd put in their hand, but champagne and the wine flowed like water. And eventually we came out the Ritz, called a taxi back. We weren't going to walk back across Green Park. We'd all had enough. Called a taxi back and we got in the taxi and Olive Cooper said she was hungry as hell. And the taxi driver said, "Don't mean to tell me you've been to the Ritz and you're hungry." She said, "I am." She said, "First pub we come to, we'll stop," she said, "and I want a Guinness and a ham roll." So we went into Robin Hood in Loughton and Olive went in. She said, "I'll get the drinks." She bought 4 or 5 big ham rolls. Well, there were 7 of us. But all ham rolls and cheese rolls, packets of crisps. We had a good feed there for about an hour. Anyhow, the next wedding we got to, next wedding we went to, was his son married an old and Lady Summer Leighton's daughter up at Summer Leighton Hall. And the service took place in the grounds of the church in the grounds of Summer Leighton. And it was only big enough to hold about, I think, 50 or 60. So just close friends of the family and family went. The rest of us had got to go to the hall at, I think it was 2 o'clock, and meet and there for drinks and proper sit-down meal. There was a big marquee, little jazz band, and I got taken to one of the ladies who was sort of introduced meeting us and one thing and another, public relations one. She said I was gamekeeper. Oh, she said, "Are you the gamekeeper? What's coming?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Come on, I've got to introduce you to Lord Summer Leighton's gamekeeper. He'll look after you." Then we had a good session with him. I was all right. We was being picked up, driven there and driven back. That was all right, that was. Then another one we went to with his other son married a French woman, little French girl. And they had the wedding at Chelsea, whatever the church was in Chelsea. Our parson from Yeldham, he was going, he had an invitation to go. We said, "Can we catch a ride with you?" He said, yes, of course you can. So we rode up with John Suddard. And I said, "How are you going to park, John?" He said, "I've got it all weighed up." He said, "I know the church warden. She's going to have a bollard outside the church, and that'll be for me to park in." We pulled up outside the church, and there was the bollard. Out came the church warden, moved the bollard inside. He said, "Leave your car there, John," and there we went. We went along the pub and had a bit of lunch. I think the wedding was at 2 o'clock. We went along the pub and had a bit of lunch and came back. Lord Denham followed us. He said, "What are you doing up here, Dick?" I said, "Same as what you are, I reckon, my lord, ain't you?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "We're making a habit of meeting at Soames's weddings, aren't we?" I said, "Yeah, we are." But he used to live up Spencer's where where Lord and Lady Butler bought. After he moved out, they bought it back again. Butler did. So, they had half a service in French and half in English. Then we went to a big doing, some herb gardens near Chelsea Hospital, 7 acres of all herbs open to the public, I think, nearly all the year round. They had a big marquee on the big lawn. They had the wedding cake was in shape of the Eiffel Tower, and half the speech was in French and half in English. That was another nice out one at Dolly. And when we got to Summer Leighton, Ruth and Andrew took us, and they were going to have a picnic. So we said, "Well, you have a picnic with us?" They were going to have it at Roxham Broad. So when we got to Summer Leighton Hall, we drove round the back. There wasn't nobody. There wasn't a sign of life nowhere. There was a big sort of car park in front of the big house. I said, "Well, let's drive down to the car park there. We obviously the first ones here." So we drove down in front of the house, and Andrew parked and got out the car, and there he stood in his old shorts, and his shoes on and his little socks. Out came a butler. "Excuse me, sir," he said, "we're not open to the public, if you don't mind." So he said, "I've got a couple of guests here, sir," he said, "who come to the wedding." "Oh, I see. Well, the wedding guests go round the back and in the back door." He said, "In the back entrance, if you don't mind. If you don't mind moving your car as soon as you possibly can." I reckon he thought, "Don't want to know. I'll wreck a car standing in the front there." So round the back we went, and that wasn't many minutes later before they started rolling up. There was a gang of about 7 or 8 rolled out of one big car they'd apparently rented for the day. And the car park was sort of sectioned off with fir poles or railway sleepers, something like that. Oh, the young devil, he drove over one. He got halfway through the car, banging and rattling, and the car wouldn't go no further. That was sort of like on a seesaw. And there they all got behind it, tried to push it off. And I said to Andrew standing there, I said, "They're pushing the wrong way, aren't they?" He said, "Of course they are." He said, "Let them get on with it." I said, "No." I said, I'll damage that car. It's a good car." So I said, "Cue me, you lot." I said, "You're pushing the wrong end. Come and get round the front." and push it back the way it went in. I come round the front, got on the bonnet and on the wing, and went off no trouble. One of the girls dressed up in the finery company, she said they ain't got no bloody sense they were born with, she said. We'd rented this car for the day, she said, nearly buggered it up first time we went in it, she said. When I remember going to school once, and they were tarring Church Lane with an old tar pot, with an old-fashioned tar pot, I'm talking about before the war, with a horse in the shafts, pulling the tar pot along, and a barrel of tar on the top, which ran into the boiler and had a fire underneath, and when the tar was hot enough, there'd be a man with a hose pipe and a spray the road, and other workmen were waiting with barrelfuls of stone to check the stone on the wet tar. Have you seen it done? I was going to school once down Church Lane, and the bloke using the spray saw me coming, and he stopped the spray going. He was a man from Ruggles. He knew my father because they worked together. So I went by, he said, have you got your apple, boy? So I stopped, I said, what? He said, have you got your apple? I said, no. He said, yeah, I was one taking an apple to school. He said, I took an apple to school for the teacher. He did, you? He said, yeah, I was one taking an apple. So of course I carried on my way and went to school. I never forgot it. Years later I come out of our village shop. I called in the shop to get an answer back, and going by was a young lad of about 9. He said, hello, Dick. And I thought, what a change there are, because I thought, we daren't call anybody our elders by their Christian name, you know, would be Mr. Chambers or Mr. Hardy or Mr. Clark, never by their Christian name. So I said, hello, Darren. And I suddenly thought of this bloke, Tarn. I said, have you got your apple? So he stopped, he got his satchel on his back. What do you mean? I said, you got an apple? No. I said, when I went to school, I took an apple for the teacher. He said, bloody creep. And I thought, don't things change with the younger generation? One of Peter Roman's shoots, he always used to have a shoot before Christmas. And of course, a lot of the children of the guns were home for Christmas holiday. There was, Peter got 3 boys and a daughter, and there was other youngsters there. And when we got on the lorry with the beaters, they'd come with us beaters, you see. And once after lunch, we'd had a few drinks in the barn. Peter always brought out plenty of beer. We had plenty of beer. Always be a bottle or 2 of sloe gin, a bottle of whiskey. We'd have quite a good lunchtime. Then we used to get back on the lorry after dinner. We was in a bit of a festive mood, especially Christmas time. And Colonel Jim, he got his 2 sons there with some friends. So Benji, his eldest son, we said, "What are you broke up at school, Benji?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Did you have a carol service?" He said, "Yes." "What carols did you sing?" Oh yeah, whatever that was. Good King Wenceslas, yes. I sing it. So we'd all sit on the lorry and sing Good King Wenceslas, and these kids used to join in with us, you know. "Wish you merry gentlemen," yes, and sing all them. I said, "I got a carol I bet you never sung. Have you sung the keyhole through the door?" They all looked, they said no. I said, "I'll sing it to you." I said, "Now you learn it together. I'll sing it twice and you'll learn it." "Oh, the keyhole through the door, the keyhole through the door. I saw her take her knickers off through the keyhole in the door." They all laughed. These boys said, "Come on." They all joined in. Apparently, when Benji got home, half the shoot was over, the guns was in the kennels, having a cup of tea, and I don't know if they had a sandwich or not, I don't suppose so. Having a cup of tea, and Benji went in with them. And one of them said, "Broke up school, Benji?" He said, "Yeah." "Have you carol service?" He said, "Yes." "Hey, we've been singing carols on the lorry." He said, "Have you?" "Yeah." He said, "Go on, sing us one." He said, "I learned a new one today." And he stood there and he sung the keyhole through the door. And his mother told me, she said, I grabbed his arm, said, "Come here." She said, "Wait till I see Dick Ruggles, I'll break his bloody neck." On the ship I joined out of India, We went down to Low Durban, broke down in the Indian Ocean for a couple of days. Anyhow, we eventually got going and got into Durban and got the engines repaired there and loaded up with 10,000 tonne of coal to take it. We didn't know where we were going until we left Durban. It said sealed orders until once the pilot had left you, you opened your sealed orders and gave you where you were bound for. We were bound for Buenos Aires, Argentina. So we had to go right across the South Atlantic, all on our own, no convoy, none, just on your own, Jack Jones. And an albatross came behind us, kept flying us down all day, and in the morning they'd be there again in the morning. We used to throw any food we got over the stern. His albatross would swoop down and sit on the waves and eat and have a good breakfast, and lunchtime we done the same. Evening meal we do the same, and that follows us all the way across the South Atlantic till we were a day out of Buenos Aires. And then it suddenly turned turtle and off it went. I suppose I picked another ship up, going somewhere else. We got to go into Buenos Aires. The Grass Bay, what they sunk in the mouth of the River Plate at off Montevideo, the mast of the Grass Bay still was sticking out the water, about 3 foot out the water. Anyhow, we tied up in Buenos Aires, and the Royal Marine Sergeant came aboard. He came and inspect the guns, inspect our ammunition, and see we were all right. And British consul had sent him, you see. And he said, anything you want, he said, you just get in touch with the British consul. If you want to go ashore, but go in and have a drink, he said, by all means do so. He said, but be careful. He said, Argentina is made up all sorts of nationalities. The Germans and Italians and French and Japs and all sorts. He said, but only he said, I want you to have a drink. I want you to go back to the house for drinks afterwards. I'll make out they're English. He said, don't go back with anybody. If you get a proper invitation, I'll come through the British Embassy. And then you know us all right. We said, go down to Seaman's Mission. Next door to Seaman's Mission is a nice pub called the Victory Inn, which is run by an English couple. You can get a good steak in there, reasonably cheap. The beer is cheap. I don't rake you off like I will in the bars. And just outside the dock gates, there's another Englishman keep the pub outside the dock gates. If you don't want to go into the city, he said, you have a drink there by all means. He said, but any invitation will come strictly from us. We had an invitation to play a sports club that entertain us for an afternoon. If we could get a team of 11 to play football. We got a team of the ship's company to play football on this sports ground. Actually, I was on my 22nd birthday. We played a match, all right, they beat us about 5-3, but afterwards we all had a cold shower and went out on the lawn, and they dished us up with great big pints of lager. And the parson from the mission got up and he thanked them in Spanish for entertaining us for the day, and then he spoke it in English so we knew what he said. And then he said, ladies, no, he said, gentlemen, he said, it's one of our company, it's his 21st birthday. I all stood up and sang happy birthday to me. I thought, you're wrong, mate, I'm 22, but I ain't going to say nothing. I sat there and I had to stand up nicely and politely thank them. A few days later, we have an invitation come down on the ship for 3 gunners to spend a week, a Sunday, with an English family in a little village called Florida, they pronounced it. It was spelt like Florida. We, 3 of us said we'd give Phil Hunt, an army gunner from Melton Mowbray, 12 years older than I was. We got great friends afterwards. We said we'd go on a little liver paddling, but he had cold feet come to finish. The taxi rolled. No, we had instructions to come where to catch the train from, what platform to go from, how much the ticket was going to be, what time and everything. And we'd be met at Florida Station by Mrs. Lambert at 12 noon. I think we caught the train about 10 o'clock in the morning. Me and Phil argued, we didn't know whether it was 30 miles inland, 40 miles inland or 20 miles inland, but we had an hour and a half journey anyhow on the train. we got off the station at Florida, and there was this woman standing, and she said, "Mr. Hunt, Mr. Ruggles?" We said, "Yes." She said, "I'm Mrs. Lambert." We said, "Well, we apologise, there's only two of us instead of three." She said, "Oh, well, it doesn't matter." She said, "We're each going to have one each." She said, "Well, the other two can have you for lunch." She said, "And I'll have you both for dinner tonight." So we got in the car. She said, "I'm going to take you now to a tennis club." She said, "We've got a tennis club in the village that all the English people use." And she said, "They do like they do in England, ordinary Sunday. They're going to have a couple of 3 pints, a game of darts, and go home for lunch about 1. So she turned and looked at me and Phil in the front. She said, "If you don't mind, Phil," she said, "Dick's a bit younger than you. I'll send him with the Peters family." She said, "They've got a daughter about 18, and said she'll be more used to Dick's age than she will yours." So well, we got the tennis club and introduced us all round. Great big pints of beer was shoved in the hand. Had a game of darts, and I was playing for money, like a killer thing. I've learned it after. We used to play it at the pub afterwards. So much to Phil ain't got the money. As it happened, I'd got 10 pesos. I thought, well, that'd be enough. He only put an odd copper in. And I waded up the first round. I thought, I don't know, I reckon I could beat this lot with a bit of luck. Sure enough, I won the first kitty. We went again and paid Phil entrance into the next one. I won the second kitty. And then Mrs. Lambert called me through in the saloon, and there was this young daughter, introduced as Marion Peters. Mrs. Lambert went and got us a drink, and got about 1 o'clock. She said, "Oh, come on, Dick, we've got to go for lunch." And we'd about 5 minutes walk from our house. It appeared all to be bungalows in his village. We went in, their mother and father, met her mother and father. Her father was a lot older than what mother was. And her father was in the stock exchange in Argentina, and she was the only daughter, so I reckon they married late in life, I don't know. I had a big black mammy maid wait on table. He stood down to the table, carved a great big bit of beef, lovely thick slices. What, I was 22, I could eat nowadays. We had a damn good meal, and then had an afters, and then biscuits and cheese and a glass of port. All going around there. And he went to the sideboard and he got out a box of cigars. And I really didn't smoke. He said, "Have a cigar." I thought, well, I won't spoil it. So I took a cigar and we lit up. He said, "I want you to come with me now." He said, "I want you to walk up and down the kitchen garden with me." So we walked slowly down the kitchen garden path. We got the end, we came back. We turned the end, we went back talking, and he's an interesting old fella. They came from Surrey originally. He wanted to know about the different towns and so on. His son, well, Southampton had been bombed a lot. Guildford I don't know much about and that sort of thing. Ports I could tell them about, but I didn't know nothing about inland. Finally, on the third time back up the path, he said, "That's all right, he's seen us now." And when we got in the house, I said, "What was that in aid of?" He said, "I've got a German live next door." He said, and he entertained 3 internees from the Grass Bay last week, or a week ago. He said, and he walked them up and down the garden path, he said, for my benefit. He said, "I've walked you today." That'll do. So when we got in, he said, "Well, you could either put your feet up," he said, "because I'm going to." So I said, "Well, I'd like to have a look round the village." He said, "I thought perhaps you might." He said, "Marion will take you round." So the village was large, but they all seemed to be, the roads all seemed to be the same, all set out in as though that was on a drawing board, bungalows every so often, that sort of a little church or chapel in the corner. And that was it. Anyway, when we got back, Mrs. Peters said, "Mrs. Lambert has rung up." She said, "You ought to go to dinner as well, Marion." She said, and being so one short, she said, "and then we'll meet you later on and take you back to the train." So we went down there, went down to the Lamberts more or less straight away, and he had pints of beer in pewter tankards. That's the first one I'd seen with a glass bottom. And he said there's conflicting reports. Some say they was to watch the cricket on the village green, and not miss a ball. The other one was to say, said that if you had glass bottles in a pub, if they were playing for money, they'd watch that the man wasn't cheating when you was having a drink. So he said, take your pick what you think. Anyhow, we had a damn good evening meal, and the Peters came down, and the other couple that Phil stayed with, and we all went back to the station about 9. I think we got back in the business hours about 11. That's the last we'd seen, but that was all done through the seniors mission. Used to be different ones come up and had raffle. There used to be a bloke from Black Marine, Peck Barber his name was. Old Peck would raffle anything. He'd perhaps bring an old rabbit in, or hare, or chicken. Hey, I'll get us some tombola tickets, £10 each. He'd raffle a hare. I won one Christmas. And brought his hare home. Oh, Douglas said she went. We got her own house then, and I was going to town cooking. Got their cookery book out, had a jug of hare. I skinned this damn great hare. Well, we had enough hare to last us a fortnight. That's sickened us with the hare, didn't it? But old Peck was raffling, he'd bring a couple of pickled cabbage up, red cabbage. Who has us ever raffled for a couple of pickled cabbage? Enough just to get a pint, and that's all he worried about, wasn't it?
But years ago in the paper, that one, you know, the hen got on the fire.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I found in an old Gazette 1913. Cruelty to a hen in Toppersville. And that was an old boy walked in the chestnut with a hen on his shoulder, and somebody knocked the hen off the shoulder into the fire, and they took to Headingham Court, the cruelty to a hen. They got fined £0.5 crown, I think it was.
Yeah.
And so much cost, 1 shilling cost, something like that. He used to sing away down in Ayrshire, a farmer did dwell, who hired a skivvy whose first name was Nell. A sweet-looking damsel of just 17, she would work day and night on the threshing machine. Now said the farmer to Nelly one bright summer's day, when the rest of the Langos were out mowing hay, come into the barn, dear, we'll never be seen, and I'll show you the works of the threshing machine. The barn doors stood open, they both went inside, and the dirty old farmer, he started to ride. He put out his hand to shut off the steam, and he blew all his chaff on the threshing machine. Said the judge to the farmer with a pen in his claw, you dirty old farmer, you've broken the law. You gave our poor Nelly a merle maiden queen, result of your chaff on the threshing machine.